The Messengers by Richard Harding Davis. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ambrosius16. The Messengers by Richard Harding Davis. When Ainsley first moved to Lone Lake Farm, all of his friends asked him the same question. They wanted to know if the farmer who sold it to him had abandoned it as worthless, how one of the idle rich, who could not distinguish a plough from a harrow, hoped to make it pay. His answer was that he had not purchased the farm as a means of getting richer by honest toil, but as a retreat from the world and as a test of true friendship. He argued that the people he knew accepted his hospitality at Sherry's because, in any event, they themselves would be dining within a taxicab fare of the same place. But if to see him they travelled all the way to Lone Lake Farm, he might feel assured that they were friends indeed. Lone Lake Farm was spread over many acres of rocky ravine and forest, at a point where Connecticut approaches New York, and between it and the nearest railroad station stretched 6 miles of an execrable wood road. In this wilderness, directly upon the lonely lake, and at a spot equally distant from each of his boundary lines, Ainsley built himself a red brick house. Here in solitude he exiled himself, ostensibly to become a gentleman farmer, in reality to wait until Polly Kirkland had made up her mind to marry him. Lone Lake, which gave the farm its name, was a pond hardly larger than a city block. It was fed by hidden springs and fringed about with reeds and cattails, stunted willows and shivering birch. From its surface jutted points of the same rock that had made farming unremunerative. And to these miniature promontories and islands Ainsley, in keeping with a fancied resemblance, gave such names as the Needles, St. Helena, the Isle of Pines. From the edge of the pond that was farther up from the house rose a high hill heavily wooded. At its base, oak and chestnut trees spread their branches over the water, and when the air was still, were so clearly reflected in the pond that the leaves seemed to float upon the surface. To the smiling expanse of the farm, the lake was what the eye is to the human countenance. The oaks were its eyebrows, the fringe of reeds its lashes, and, in changing mood, it flashed with happiness or brooded in sombre melancholy. For Ainsley it held a deep attraction. Through the summer evenings, as the sun set, he would sit on the brick terrace and watch the fish leaping, and listen to the venerable bullfrogs croaking false alarms of rain. Indeed, after he met Polly Kirkland, staring moodily at the lake became his favourite form of exercise. With a number of other men, Ainsley was very much in love with Miss Kirkland, and unprejudiced friends thought that if she were to choose any of her devotees, Ainsley should be that one. Ainsley heartily agreed in this opinion, but in persuading Miss Kirkland to share it, he had not been successful. This was partly his own fault, for when he dared to compare what she meant to him with what he had to offer her, he became a mass of sodden humility. Could he have known how much Polly Kirkland envied and admired his depth of feeling? Entirely apart from the fact that she herself inspired that feeling, how greatly she wished to care for him in the way he cared for her. Life, even alone in the silences of Lone Lake, would have been a beautiful and blessed thing. But he was so sure she was the most charming and wonderful girl in all the world, and he an unworthy and despicable being, that when the lady demurred, he faltered, and his pleading, at least to his own ears, carried no conviction. "When one thinks of being married," said Polly Kirkland gently, "it isn't a question of the man you can live with, but the man you can't live without. And I'm sorry, but I've not found that man." "I suppose," returned Ainsley gloomily, "that my not being able to live without you doesn't affect the question in the least." "You have lived without me," Miss Kirkland pointed out reproachfully, "for 30 years. "Lived!" almost shouted Ainsley. "Do you call that living? What was I before I met you? I was an ignorant beast of the field. I knew as much about living as one of the cows on my farm. I could sleep 12 hours at a stretch, or, if I was in New York, I never slept. I was a day and night bank of health and happiness, a great big useless puppy. And now I can't sleep, can't eat, can't think, except of you. I dream about you all night, think about you all day, go through the woods calling your name, cutting your initials in tree trunks, doing all the fool things a man does when he's in love, and I'm the most miserable man in the world. And the happiest! He finally succeeded in making Miss Kirkland so miserable also that she decided to run away. Friends had planned to spend the entire spring on the Nile and were eager that she should accompany them. To her, the separation seemed to offer an excellent method of discovering whether or not Ainsley was a man she could not live without. Ainsley saw in it only an act of torture, devised with devilish cruelty. "What will happen to me," he announced firmly, "is that I will plain die. As long as I can see you, as long as I have the chance to try and make you understand that no one can possibly love you as I do, and as long as I know I am worrying you to death, and no one else is, I still hope. I've no right to hope, still I do. And that one little chance keeps me alive. But Egypt? If you escape to Egypt, what hold will I have on you? You might as well be in the moon. Can you imagine me writing love letters to a woman in the moon? Can I send American Beauty roses to the ruins of Karnak? Here I can telephone you. Not that I ever have anything to say that you want to hear, but because I want to listen to your voice and to have you ask, 'Oh, is that you?' as though you were glad it was me. But Egypt? Can I call up Egypt on the long distance? If you leave me now, you will leave me forever, for I'll drown myself in Lone Lake." The day she sailed away, he went to the steamer, and, separating her from her friends and family, drew her to the side of the ship farther from the wharf, and which, for the moment, was deserted. Directly below, a pile driver, with rattling of chains and shrieks from her donkey engine, was smashing great logs. On the deck above, the ship's band was braying forth fictitious gaiety, and from every side they were assailed by the raucous whistles of ferry boats. The surroundings were not conducive to sentiment, but for the first time Polly Kirkland seemed a little uncertain, a little frightened. Almost on the verge of tears, almost persuaded to surrender. For the first time she laid her hand on Ainsley's arm, and the shock sent the blood to his heart and held him breathless. When the girl looked at him, there was something in her eyes that neither he nor any other man had ever seen there. "The last thing I tell you," she said, "the thing I want you to remember is this, that, though I do not care, I want to care." Ainsley caught at her hand, and to the delight of the crew of a passing tugboat, kissed it rapturously. His face was radiant. The fact of parting from her had caused him real suffering, and marked his face with hard lines. Now, hope and happiness smoothed them away, and his eyes shone with his love for her. He was trembling, laughing, jubilant. "And if you should," he begged, "how soon will I know?" "You will cable," he commanded. "You will cable, 'Come!' and the same hour I'll start toward you. I'll go home now," he cried, "and pack." The girl drew away. Already she regretted the admission she had made. In fairness and in kindness to him she tried to regain the position she had abandoned. "But a change like that," she pleaded, "might not come for years, may never come." To recover herself, to make the words she had uttered seem less serious, she spoke quickly and lightly. "And how could I cable such a thing?" she protested. "It would be far too scared, too precious. You should be able to feel that the change has come." "I suppose I should," assented Ainsley doubtfully, "but it's a long way across 2 oceans. It would be safer if you'd promise to use the cable. Just one word. Come." The girl shook her head and frowned. "If you can't feel that the woman you love loves you, even across the world, you cannot love her very deeply." "I don't have to answer that," said Ainsley. "I will send you a sign," continued the girl hastily. a secret wireless message.